Hello Wargamers and welcome to Let's Get Critical. My name is Gar. In this playlist I'll be showing you my first attempts at weathering terrain for Warhammer Kill Team, and in this first video I'll be showing you how I painted these scrapyard pile terrain pieces which are from the 2nd edition starter set for Kill Team. Originally they were 3 separate pieces, but as you can see here as I turn it over, I've glued them together and now I've got 2 pieces that are roughly the same size. If you want to see how I turn them from this and then into this and then finally into this, then please sit back, relax and let's get painting. The first colour I chose to use was Citadel base colour, and it's called Iron Warriors. And for the brush I chose this really cheap Daleroni hobby store brush, and it's got some massive bristles. Originally when I got these terrain pieces I sprayed them with some very cheap spray paint just to give them some colour, but now I want to paint them up properly. What I'm doing is just basically getting some of the Iron Warriors paint onto the brush. I'm adding just a little bit of the water and I'm just going to give them a very good one coat. The reason I'm just giving them one coat is because they've already been primed with the spray paint. There's no frills with this, it's just a really cheap brush that I picked up from the hobby store, so I'm not afraid of damaging it. I'm just loading it with paint and I'm using those big massive bristles to very roughly get into all the nooks and crannies and just give it one good coat of that Iron Warriors paint. When both of the pieces were painted, when I was happy with the coverage and they both had a good coat, I moved on to start adding some more metallic colours, which I'll show you just now. The next colour I chose was another Citadel colour. It's a classic colour and it's called Leadbelcher. And for the brush I chose another Daleroni brush. It's a number 6. The reason I chose quite a big brush like this is because I'm not too bothered about how neat I'm going to be because of all the weathering I'll be doing. All I want to do at this stage is slowly build up the colour, adding other metallic colours so it doesn't look like, you know, a flat grey colour. I'm using this brush to target what looks like it's the body of a vehicle that runs along the centre of this terrain piece right here. Then I moved on to the second terrain piece. The first piece that I decided to paint was another part that looks like it's off a vehicle or something. I gave this a coat of the Leadbelcher. Around the other side I found these 2 pieces that look kind of like canisters, so I picked them out with the Leadbelcher as well. And finally I decided to do this piece at the other end of the model. Again, it looks like it's something off a vehicle. It's quite a large piece, so I picked it out. I gave it a coat of the Leadbelcher and then I moved on to the next colour. The next colour I chose is another Citadel base colour and it's called Abaddon Black. Using the same brush as I did before, I decided with this black colour to start picking out the tyres, and I slowly gave it a quick coat just to bring out that black colour. Initially I was only going to give it one coat of the Abaddon Black, but as the coverage wasn't brilliant, I decided to give it 2 coats. And as Abaddon Black is the only non-metallic colour I'll be using, I just thought I'd get it done now before I move on. It's now back to the metallic colours, and the next colour I chose is Iron Hand Steel. The first piece that I picked out was this lid. It looks like some type of lid to a vat or something, and it has a handle on the top. And next I picked out this broken circular piece. I'm not sure what it is, your guess is as good as mine. All I'm doing though at this stage is I'm just picking out some of the larger and the more prominent pieces on the model so I can add variation and colour and stop it looking really flat. I then moved on to the next terrain piece and starting to pick out this engine block. It's a lovely big part of the model. It was easy to get the brush over it, so I gave that a coat of the paint. And finally I saw these wheeled hub pieces on the other side of the model. I decided to paint those before moving on to the next colour. For the next colour I chose a Citadel layer paint and it's called Brass Scorpion. I decided to paint this large vent on this side of the model. It was easy to get to, it was nice and big, and I thought it would look brilliant if I painted it brass. But bearing in mind it's already had a coat of the primer and it's already had, you know, the eye wires, I had to be really careful, and I just gave it a super thin coat. I let it go bone dry and then slowly built the colour up again. I didn't want to start robbing the detail and leaving chunks of paint everywhere, so I just had to be very careful while I gave it 2 thin coats of paint. For the next piece, you'll probably notice, and this is one of the pieces that I painted with one of the other metallic colours, but I decided looking at it, it would look better in brass, so very quickly I just gave it a couple of thin coats of the Brass Scorpion. Then I spotted this piece here. I thought, you know, this looks like a nice piece. It's easy to paint and it you know, it looks pretty cool. So it got a coat of the Brass Scorpion as well. 2 quick coats and then onto the other terrain piece. The final piece was just some pipe work I saw down here in the corner. Nice and inconspicuous. So that got a coat of paint and then I moved on to the next colour. The next colour I chose is another Citadel base colour and it's called Runelord Brass. As you can see here, you know, the model I think starting to really come together and look like a pile of scrap metal with some tyres, but I want more variation and I decided this piece down here. It looks like some form of canister or something. I'm not sure, your guess again is as good as mine, but just like with the Brass Scorpion, it got 2 coats of the Runelord Brass. I thought that this pipe here, painted in Runelord Brass, would look really cool next to the other pipe in Brass Scorpion, so I gave that a couple of coats of the brass paint as well. I decided to stick with the theme of painting the pipework brass and trying to give it, I don't know, a realistic look. So this vehicle that forms like the centerpiece to this terrain model, I decided to give it 2 coats of the Runelord Brass as well. Finally, I found these pipes on the edge of this model, so I decided give those 2 coats of the Runelord Brass and then move on to the next colour. The next colour I chose is a Citadel layer paint and it's called Canoptek Alloy. Down here in the corner between the tyres and the vent that we painted Brass Scorpion earlier, I saw this piece, so I gave that 2 coats of the Canoptek Alloy. I switched to the other terrain piece. I found this canister nestled between the engine block and a tyre and picked that one out as well. And then off to the next colour. The next colour I'll be using is a Citadel colour base paint and it's called Warplock Bronze. I saw this canister amongst these pieces down here, so I decided to give this some of the new colour. Like all the other colours, it was 2 coats of the Warplock Bronze and then I moved on. And I also found this canister, so sticking with the theme of canisters and pipes being brass colours, this got 2 coats of the Warplock Bronze as well. I moved on to the second terrain piece and I really got no idea what this is, but I decided to paint it anyway. I don't know if it's a pipe or what, but it got 2 coats of the Warplock Bronze and then after that I moved on to the next colour. The next colour I'll be using is another metallic colour, it's another bronze colour, it's from Citadel and it's called Castellax Bronze. I found this panel down here, so I decided to give this 2 coats of the Castellax Bronze. Like with all the metallic colours, you know, just be very careful applying 2 thin coats and make sure you don't get it on all the other metal parts and slowly build up that colour. When I saw this piece here, it looks like it's a chest, it's some kind of, you know, ammo crate or a chest there. I decided I'd be adventurous and give this a coat of the Castellax Bronze. I'll be honest, it was quite tricky to paint, and when I started getting going I kind of regretted it, but I stuck with it, I persevered, and very slowly I gave it 2 coats and then moved on to the next section. On the other terrain piece, I found these two pipes down here amongst all the scrap, and yeah, that's it. I gave them 2 coats of the Warplock Bronze. You know, as you can see, the model's really starting to look good and come together now. So I moved on to one final colour, which I'll show you just now. And for the final metallic colour I'll be using is the another Citadel colour. It's a layer paint and it's called Sycorax Bronze. The first piece that I picked out was down here. It's at the end of this, it looks like some kind of vent or grill that, you know, go on the top at the front of this vehicle. So like with all the metallic paints, it was just 2 thin coats, build the colour up slowly and then move on to the next section. Next, I saw another big piece. It's a barrel, it's half a barrel that's trapped under all the bits, so that looks easy to get to, and it obviously sticks out well, so that got 2 coats of the paint as well. This piece here was nice and big, and you know, I was just really building up all of these different colours, and I decided to go for it. I was going to make it rust in the end, but I thought, you know what, it would look really nice in bronze. It was quite tricky to paint, but you know, 2 thin coats and it did the trick. I then switched over to the other terrain piece and I found this piece, and it looks more or less identical to the piece that I just painted on the other terrain piece. So I thought, you know, keeping with the theme, having a bit of common colours between it, I decided to paint this as well. It's the last of the metallic colours, and after this I'll show you a quick showcase of what it looks like now. And here they are. Both the terrain pieces are painted. It's taken quite some time. We've used lots of colours, but I think they look absolutely fantastic. They're gleaming, they're shining, and I think they look absolutely brilliant. All those colours have come together, and you know, it looks really, really good. And here's the other piece here. Again, looks brilliant, perfectly happy. But I think what we've got to do now to add some depth and to add some realism is one of my most favourite parts, and it's time to move on to shading. The shade paint I chose is one of the classics from Citadel. It's a favourite of mine and it's called Nuln Oil. Now, I'm not sure if any of you wargamers have seen any of my other painting videos, but there are 2 things you really need to pay attention to when shading. The first is you need to apply a liberal coat of the shade paint all over every part of the model, and you can see here with me using the brush, I'm covering the model with the Nuln Oil. You want to apply it generously, but you don't want massive puddles of the shade paint forming in the recesses and the crevices of the model. Now, after I've applied some of the Nuln Oil, you can see that I'm using the brush to spread it around, and then I'm just loading the brush with more of the shade paint. I'm doing it all over again until the model's completely covered. I mean, it's not rocket science. Just follow it as I'm doing it, and it will come out looking great once it's dry. The second thing that you need to do when shading a model is to use a piece of kitchen roll or a rag to remove most of the paint that was on the bristles. Then you just want to keep spreading the paint around the model. You need to keep checking the deepest recesses of the model to find the large puddles of paint. You stick the bristles of the brush in there and they'll soak up the pool of paint, and then you just spread it around to other parts of the model. And you keep going until the whole thing is completely free of puddles and pools, which when they dried, they would have spoilt the way the model looks and they would have hidden all of those great details. And here they are after they have completely dried. Now, I think they look great. There are lots of different colours that I use to easily identify different parts of the model, like the pipes and, you know, and the sheets of metal. It's done a great job. When shading, it's added depth and it's tied all those colours together. Another thing I say is the paints I've applied have still left lots of details like nuts and bolts and screwdrivers. They're all still easily recognisable. Now, I've gotten this far before with other models, but what I'm going to do next is all brand new to me, and it'll be the first time that I've ever tried it. The next step is to start applying the rust effect. To start the rust effect, the first colour I chose to use is a Citadel layer paint, and it's called Skrag Brown. The first step to applying the rust effect is going to be to give the model a wash I make from the Skrag Brown paint. Using my Citadel servo pallet, I load a couple of drops of paint into the larger reservoirs, and then I start to add water until I had a nice thick wash. I'm going to use this thick wash to cover parts of the model that I want to be made to look very, very heavily rusted. Now you can see here on this model, these areas that I'm pointing to with the end of the brush, these are the areas that I want to have a very, very heavy rust effect, and these are the areas that I think would naturally kind of hold water and they'd hold grime, and this is where the rust would form if it was a real scrap metal piece. Now this should make the model look genuinely rusty, and hopefully it will add an effect of realism to the terrain. To apply the paint, I just smear it all over the areas that I wanted to, I want to apply the rust effect. I'm not too bothered about how thick it is, because when it dries, I want it to look quite chunky and quite bitty, and I want it to hide some of the details of the plastic underneath, because this is what rust would do. If it had formed on top of a real metallic surface, it would have a chunky and bitty look to it. On these raised parts of the model here, I wanted to apply some of the wash, but I wanted it to be quite thin, and afterwards the whole intention was to dry brush it with a metal colour so that the tone of the Skrag Brown paint is all over the terrain piece. Here you can see the first terrain piece, and this is what it looks like after I'd applied the Skrag Brown wash, and then this is the second terrain piece after I'd applied the wash. What I'm going to do now is move on to the next step in the process, which is the dry brushing. The colour I'll be using for the dry brush, it's a Citadel layer paint and it's called Runefang Steel. And for the brush I'll be using the Citadel medium dry brush. I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen my other videos, but I'll quickly go through it. But for the dry brushing step, you need the paint and you need the brush, but you also need some kitchen roll, like you can see here. Now these areas here, these are the areas that I want to dry brush. I want to slowly build up the metallic colour, but I want to keep the rusty brown wash colour trapped underneath. Now when dry brushing, you need to add a tiny drop of paint to the brush like I show you here. You then need to work that paint into the bristles of the brush like this. And then when you use the kitchen roll, what you need to do is wipe off the excess paint until you're left with a brush that looks like this. You've got a very large brush with very large bristles, but there's practically no paint on them whatsoever. Next, you slowly start flicking the brush over the areas you want to highlight, and the paint will only affect the raised areas, and slowly but surely you'll see the metal effect coming through. After a while you'll need to load the brush again with some more paint, so it's the same process. You just apply a bit of the paint to the brush and you work it into those bristles, and then you move over to the kitchen roll and you wipe off the excess, and then just pick up the model and start dry brushing it again. With this model, I went over it, quite a few times until I was happy, and then that was it. I then moved on to the second terrain piece, and this part here, as you can see, I'm going to give this a dry brush here, this piece, and this piece up here, this kind of engine block, is going to get dry brushed. I'm going to go over that, and then on the other side, I'm going to do this engine block here as well. The key thing to learn when dry brushing, in my opinion, is to keep building up the desired colour very, very slowly, and don't add too much paint because it ruins it. Now dry brushing is a very good technique to learn. Its effects are very, very effective. I use it all the time on all sorts of models. The dry brushing step here, it was the last step in this terrain project that required normal paints. All the next steps I'll be using technical paints from the Citadel range, and I'll show you how I use those to make this heavily rusted and final effect. I'll show you those now. The next colour I'll be using is a technical paint by Citadel, and it's called Typhus Corrosion. And for the brush I'll be using the De La Rowley 6 brush that I used earlier in the video. When adding the Typhus Corrosion technical paint, I want to target the areas that I applied the heaviest Skrag Brown wash to. I'm looking for areas like here in this toolbox here. You can see all the brown in there, and then over here on the engine block in this part here as well. Now I'm looking for about a 70% coverage of the Typhus Corrosion paint, and I want about 30% of the area to show the original Skrag Brown wash we did earlier. Now this paint, it's very, very damaging to your brushes, so make sure that you only use an old or very cheap brush when applying this. And I'm just loading the paint onto the brush and then removing excess on the palette, and then I'm just stippling it into the areas that I want to cover. And just like the other colours, I'm applying it bit by bit and very, very slowly, adding more and more until I have the coverage that I'm looking for, which again was about a 70% coverage of the Typhus Corrosion, so there's about 30% of the original underneath. After I had applied about 70% coverage to the areas of the model which had had a heavy wash of the Skrag Brown, I then moved on to the metallic areas which I dry brushed earlier. Now I want these areas to have about a 10% coverage of the Typhus Corrosion, but I only want it to be applied to the edges of certain areas so it looks like the corrosion has just started to take effect. And here you can see me painting it very selectively onto some of the areas, focusing on the edges to finish off the application of this technical paint. You can see I'm applying just a bit here around this corner here, and then I move down here, and just along the edges I'm applying some of the paint. Here you can see on the other terrain piece, you know, this has had a 70% coverage in lots of the areas, and now I want to target the raised areas where you can see that I dry brushed them earlier, and I'm going to do the same like I did before. Here are the scrap piles now after they've had the Typhus Corrosion applied. I think they look fantastic, and I think all the hard work has really paid off, but the best part has been saved until last. Because the best thing about this technical paint is that when it's dry, it leaves a very hard, gritty, sand-like texture, which makes a great surface for applying the final paint, which will be coming up just now. The final paint I'll be using for this project is a Citadel colour. It's a dry paint. It's called Ryza Rust. And the brush I'll be using is a Citadel small dry brush. Now, just like when we dry brushed earlier, we load a small amount of paint onto the brush and we work the paint into the bristles. We then wipe off the excess onto a piece of kitchen paper. Then all we do is pick up the model and we gently apply the paint, flicking it over the areas where we covered with Typhus Corrosion. The Ryza Rust paint has been specifically designed for dry brushing, and it has a very thick texture and it has a brilliant orange colour, and it really looks like rust. Now you can see that as I'm doing this, the orange colour we associate with rust is really starting to come through and make this model pop. And just like with all the other colours, when we add the Ryza Rust, we do it bit by bit and very slowly until we have the desired effect that we're looking for. Here's another piece of the model. I'm doing this, just to show you how effective the Ryza Rust is. I mean, look at that. You apply just a tiny bit and just start flicking it over that Typhus Corrosion, and instantly it looks rusty. It's an absolutely brilliant effect. I love it, and I'm really glad that I did this, and all the hard work's paying off. I'm super pleased right now. You can see here that I'm just now targeting the areas that I've painted, with just a bit of the corrosion. These are the areas where I applied like a 10% corrosion, and you see how the Ryza Rust is really making those corner pieces and those edges look like they're corroded and starting to rust as well. I mean, it really is a brilliant colour. I love this. Now, these models are more or less finished. What I'm going to do now is leave you with a final close-up showcase of both the models, and I've had a great time doing this. It's been brilliant. And here they are. These are the final models here. I don't really know what to say apart from I'm absolutely delighted. When I started this project for the terrain, I really didn't have any idea what it was going to turn out like because I'd never done it before. I'd seen other videos, I'd watched other people's stuff, but I thought, let's buy the paints and give it a go, and I'm so thrilled to bits I did it. I hope you guys are happy as well. If you've got to the end of this video, then great. I mean, I really would recommend doing it and trying it for yourself. Here's the other terrain piece here. Look at that. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm so chuffed to bits. Thanks for watching. You've been watching Let's Get Critical. My name is Gar. Thank you. Bye bye.